Namaskara Sankalp listeners. Dr. Givikote Rajagopal, a resident of SCP for the last 6 years, is with us today in the Seniors Group presenting podcast A Few Minutes With. Dr. Rajagopal was born and brought up as a Pakka Mysorean Kannadiga. He has completed about 5 decades of English language academics and teaching. After completing his schooling in Mysore region, until the Masters in English in the University of Mysore, his main career base shifted to the Center for English and Foreign Languages at the University of Hyderabad, wherein he pursued a postgraduate diploma, research work in role of mother tongue in teaching English, and in 1992 he earned a PhD, which he will talk more about in our conversation. He also completed his MPhil and an advanced diploma in Scotland. In addition to the institute in Hyderabad, he taught English to various grades of students up to research in colleges across India and the Middle East, where English was not the native tongue of the pupils. Dr. Rajagopal Avare, welcome to this episode of A Few Minutes With.
Thank you very much, Ravi Bale. Very nice of you for your venture, and I'm very glad to be participating in it.
Tell us about your research and the PhD topics and the key takeaway from them.
In our field, which is called English language teaching, which includes mother tongue teaching and other tongues teaching and so on and so forth, we talk of the first language acquisition. But when we talk of language acquisition itself, we treat it as a skills development activity. Over here, I need to introduce you to one very important concept, what is called cognition. Now, cognition is something which happens in the brain of every human being. Cognition basically consists of features related to human behavior, which we call the cognitive features. As the child acquires more and more of the mother tongue, even in the school, and this enables the child to be very cognitively active. Learning is no longer a problem for the child as the child continues with the schooling. Then, if that is the case, then what is the problem with learning English? This is what I explored in my research. I took class 9 Kannada medium learners from Mysore city, from Sharda Vilas High School, from Bhagini Seva Samaja, and from Mahajanas High School. I am myself a Kannada medium child in my schooling, Gopal Swami Shishvihara. I know, therefore, that the child goes through several of these processes when it comes to class 9. So I took class 9 children, 14-year-olds. I came from Hyderabad to conduct this study. I was a registered research scholar in Hyderabad, so I chose this particular topic. So I did this study with the children where I had these two philosophies. One was that in order that a child has to learn a new language, instead of imposing the new language like English on the child straight away, can we start from a known language? In my case, it was Kannada. And you know, a class 9 Kannada medium children has had Kannada right from class 1 onwards.
Right.
9 years of English, Kannada. Lots of reading, lots of writing, lots of articulation in Kannada. I chose reading simply because of convenience. Now, I said that, for example, when it comes to reading, I examined their Kannada textbook. The Kannada textbooks had such high level of cognitive demands. They read a story on Duryodhana, Pandavas, and so on and so forth.
In Old Kannada as well as New Kannada.
Old Kannada as well as New Kannada, with all the poem and poetry, all kinds of things.
I remember, compared to that, the Sanskrit, Hindi or English is very, very simple.
Very simple.
So what happens when you introduce English through Kannada?
Absolutely. Now, if the child can do such a complex task in Kannada, it simply means that the child's cognition is so well advanced.
Yeah.
What is the problem with English then? English, nothing else. And this I explored. And I said that, okay, let me start with Kannada passages, gradually introduce English. Say in the first passage of Kannada, there is only 10% English. take out some words here and there and fit in an English word there. And because of the context, it reads in the context, it automatically reads the English word also.
Oh, that sounds
And understands it.
Yeah, it's blending in.
Absolutely. It also blends itself into the reading, and gradually, over a period of, I use 30 passages, for example, all Kannada passages, gradually I increase the dropping in of English word and from words to phrase, phrase to the sentences. And so the test was also designed in such a way that if they couldn't understand something in the passage, the questions in the test should be able to help them. So like this, progressively, the last 3-4 passages were 100% English. The process of creating a bilingual is that take the child through a known feature and use the known information, known data, known feature as a resource. The general feeling is that mother tongue is an obstruction. I wanted to remove that idea. So I wanted to say that for any child, anywhere in the world, if the child grows up in a mother tongue background, let me tell you that for the child, because of its cognitive development, there is no problem in shifting over to any other language.
That's your underlined
That's
findings.
my underlined philosophy.
Now, did you or anyone else make use of this methodology or results of your research?
Yes, this research went out in 2 formats. One was when I attended an international conference in Limpopo in South Africa, close to Kruger Park. There I made a presentation, bilingual reading methodology. South Africa has 7 major languages, including Afrikaner. They have a problem. Because South Africa has become independent, they would like to promote their own languages, but at the same time they can't avoid the presence of English. So they were very happy with this particular presentation and sought details, which I shared with them subsequently. And there were teachers also with whom I talked, and we had a session. And so they said, we will try this, and eventually they started using it. Just as, for example, there were delegates from China and Japan who also said that because of the, in China it is the geographical spread which is very crucial for them, because there are so many languages that they have. So they would also like to try, they said. In Japan, they have an active use of mother tongue in all their activities, as we know, right? And so they said, well, if we have to teach English, why can't we use this kind of... So they also got in touch with me eventually, and so those 3 nations, they implemented this particular methodology. At the same time, the second thing that I did was I encouraged MPhil as well as PhD students to incorporate this methodology in their own languages.
In Hyderabad?
In Hyderabad.
Like Telugu and other languages?
Telugu, Marathi, Gujarati, Hindi, Maithili and Odia. So they took up different skills. I worked on reading skills. Some did on reading skills and some others on other skills, listening, speaking, writing. So it has been tried out in different parts of the country. There is a possibility of bringing in some elements of my research into the national education policy.
So this sounds very encouraging, but at the same time, in current situation in India where English medium schools popped up, and right from KG, especially in urban context, usually 20 to 50% variation in mix of children's mother tongue. So English becomes preferred language outside the classroom in the school atmosphere. What do you see between learning English directly or learning through one's mother tongue or Rajya Bhasha in this case?
Very relevant in today's context. You see, the availability of language, home language as opposed to school language, is a very critical factor here. We talk of what we call home school language switch. Now, home language need not be the major language, need not be English. It could be a very minority language also. However, home language is something which works on the child's mind, well, so long as the child is at home. This is very critical, but I'll come to the other issue of this later. Then the child has to come out of the house, and as you said, in an urban setup, the moment the child enters the school bus, for example, the language changes. The school language, for example, if it is predominantly English, the child makes a switch.
Yeah.
It's not a big issue at all. Home, school, language, switch. Now the atmosphere in the school, as you said, is largely English, even outside the classroom, for example. But what happens is, the critical factor is, if the child is denied access to home language, home also switches over to English, as you can see. It's a different situation.
It's like cooking pani puri and pizza at home all
At
the
home
time.
itself. There is this concept called language loss. It's a whole language is lost to the child, in the sense that it's almost like the child growing up in a foreign country and unable to speak the mother tongue at all, and finding it very difficult when coming home, meeting grandparents and others, relatives and so on. Not all of them speak English. So this is a kind of a language loss, which is not a very happy situation. That is the language which is used in school, and that is the language which is used all round. The point here is that mother tongue should be the home language as far as possible. Just because if it's the language of the area, it's the larger language. English is a language which is historically present with us. That's all. It could have been French, it could have been Dutch. But that doesn't mean that every
I also
activity
noticed the colloquial utterances.
Absolutely.
That beauty is only available in the regional language or Matrabhasha.
Absolutely. You're right. You see, you talked of Desh Bhasha, you talked of Matrabhasha, you talked of... And if we don't preserve them at home, schools won't bother about. They won't at all. But there are situations, many people thinking in English also.
Yeah.
This is what happens eventually.
Right.
You think in the language that you know very well.
I think we can think in multiple languages depending on the topic.
Of course, yes. But the point is that any child can pick up mother's language, father's language, as well as the other language, third language or fourth language, including English, for example. If the school teaches English,
at least talking instead of if not writing and reading.
It's more of the oral skills.
Yeah, that's what comes handy most of the time.
Absolutely, that becomes very necessary. As we said earlier, the child is born with an innate or inbuilt capacity to learn one or any number of languages.
Yeah. As the child grows, becomes high school student, then the resistance is more.
Absolutely.
The learning ability is more in the primary standards.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, let me jump from academics to a professional and the world stage here.
Yes.
With my next question. What will you suggest if someone going to a non-English speaking country to work and live there for a few years, if not permanently there? Example like Japan, Czechoslovakia, where you can't manage in English outside the office atmosphere.
Yeah. Now, as we said, you may not need the history of the country, the literatures of the country, get into those aspects. Whereas everyday function might require small questions to ask, directions. I need very simple performance
Restaurants
skills.
and shopping. And
Restaurant, shopping, so on. Very simple. And how much is it? These are what we call skills of performance.
Okay.
I need to learn. First and foremost, the essential vocabulary. Secondly, I also need to learn some of those cultural features. For example, facial expressions in a certain manner, you're using your voice in a certain tone, and you're using a certain word, and you're combining all these things in order to give your impression on the listener.
In Japan and Thailand, they even bow.
They bow. Yeah, they bow. No?
In India, we may not care so much for namaste.
But then they do. That's their culture.
Yeah.
Place of work, that's a different aspect. Yes.
English or half broken English works there.
Oh, of course, yes. That's okay. Anything, that's okay.
What is your advice on this sense of purpose to learn or improve another language? It may be out of necessity or respect or practical usage, or it may be just fashion, like vogue, right?
Yeah.
Vogue of this century may be one language, maybe in 50 years learning old Kannada may become fashionable, right?
That's right.
So overcoming the negative attitude, how can one cope up with this?
This is very important, that each one of us has a certain clarity of purpose. Now, certain aspects of learning may not be very easy. They require a lot of effort. But effort will have its rewards. Now, when it comes to language also, depending on the area of occupation, it's quite important that we must work hard to acquire that language, those bits of languages, those little specialist vocabulary or specialist sentences, all these need to be acquired. We can stop learning or we can suspend learning. It doesn't harm us. What happens is that you're not part of the entire system. That's all. You will be an isolate. And therefore, sir, negative attitude towards anything or anyone who is learning anything is not a very satisfactory behavior. Is not a required type of behavior.
Yeah.
One must appreciate somebody who is learning something and using it. You and I are pretty old now. We never knew many of these things. We never knew how to handle a mobile phone. Never knew that we will be handling these things at all. But we must learn to handle it.
Yeah.
And that is a positive attitude and so on. So
Life is tough not learning gadgets
absolutely.
nowadays.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Yeah. Yes. What you are doing right now is something which is way beyond many others' imagination. But this should be done.
Now, my concluding question to you is, what are you so busy with? I took 3 months to catch hold of you for this recording.
Well, fortunately, my field of occupation, which is teaching of English and teacher training and so on and so forth, are worthy of consideration right from the local level up to the national level. I'm right now involved in preparing textbooks for classes 1 to 8 and I'll soon be working on the pre-KG and LKG and UKG textbooks also for those children in English.
Yeah.
I'm working with Rashtrottana Kendra. I'm also working with Pearson Publications. But more importantly, there is a UGC HRD center in Mysore which frequently organizes teacher education programs.
Yeah.
And I have identified 3-4 topics which suit them, and they are also happy with my choice of topics, and I'm invited frequently to give 3-hour-long sessions there for teachers. They are from various fields, recently recruited by the government. Well, and in addition, I do a lot of online teaching for various institutions, including history of English language teaching, for example, right from the history up to the current situation, where it is either motivational lectures or it's on spoken English or on testing and language, testing language, for example, communication skills and so on and so forth. Government of India has put me as an expert member on 2 committees, one of which is related to what is called Nipun, new education, under the new education policy. They want to make everybody in the nation possess basic literacy and numeracy. And similarly, there is another project related to language and spreading of Indian languages to the nation.
That sounds a lot, not just fair. It's a lot of things in your plate. I really thank you for this valuable time of yours.
Thank you.
I'm sure
I'd like parents to listen, and if you do, ask more questions to Ravi. I'm Raju. Don't call me Professor Rajagopal, Dr. none of those. Just call me Raju. I'll be most happy and I'll be most glad to respond to your questions in the best way that I can. Thank you very much.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು, ಧನ್ಯವಾದ ಮೇಷ್ಟ್ರೆ. ಇದೇ ಪಾಡ್ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ ನಾವು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು 2 ದಿವಸದಲ್ಲಿ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಹ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಕಾಯ್ತಾ ಇರಿ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಬಾಯ್ ಫಾರ್ ನೌ.